All right, welcome into another episode of Denmark and Marsh on May 31st. It's crazy to believe it's already June 1st tomorrow. We are at undisclosed locations, as you can see. I don't know if this will be posted on video, but we're not in the studio. Graham, we can put this on YouTube or not?
Uh, Probably. Depends on how
All
much
right,
time I got. Most likely.
all right. We weren't able to do a show earlier this week because Graham decided that getting pants for a wedding was more important than talking about Brian Thomas and how good his route running looks and his speed and his length and what other adjectives were described from Brian Thomas at OTAs? The ladder drill, the cone
hmm
drill. I don't know. Good guys.
Agility.
Yeah, guys looking really good in their underwear, as I like to
hmm
say.
The
Um,
athleticism jumps off the page.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Graham, today I really just wanted to talk about college football and the NCAA. There's a lot of things that's happened recently. The NCAA can pay players. The SEC meetings are going on in Destin. Um, we've had now was reported the other day that we're going to have logos now on uniforms probably for money. Possible 9-game SEC schedule. But really, with college football, Graham, I don't know of another sport that is okay other than the NFL. College football is the most watched sport. It's not the NBA. It's not the MLB, and we just have all this negativity that surrounds the sport when it comes to, well, we need this with the NIL, we need this with the transfer portal, we need a commissioner. Traditions and rivalries are going to the past because of money and all this new conference realignment. And I'm just looking at this and I get so frustrated. Okay, you live life out of the windshield, not the rearview mirror. People always want to look back in the past and say things were better. We're pretty good where we are right now. I like having the iPhone as compared to what people lived through like in the 90s or what cars are now as compared to what they were 15, 20 years ago. We have so many new things that are going to happen in college football this year. And I just want to look at the positives as compared to what most of the people that I hear, and just talk about the negatives. I don't know, kind of what's your feeling on that?
I was gonna say positive or negative. Like this off season is probably, correct me if I'm wrong, and the NBA went through this about 10 years ago, and they kind of still do it now. It's gotten a little bit better, but is this the most attention grabbing headlines we've had in a college football off season that have had nothing to do with football on the field?
Yeah, I was thinking like COVID. There was a lot of
COVID's kind of
headlines.
in its own box. I wouldn't really
Right,
count COVID
right, yeah, yeah. Other than
because
that,
COVID
no.
was about not even potentially playing games. So that was a little bit different. But just like if you just kind of put 2020 in its own box and put it over here and you talk about the rest of the history of college football, I think this is the most we've ever had, most storylines we've ever had, most things to talk about, most if you listen to any college football podcast, you know what they're leading their show with that didn't have anything to do with football being played on the field. I mean, think about the perfect example is in our backyard with the Jaden Rashada case. You think about this at this point, man. Jaden Rashada has been in the headlines since he was a recruit for being committed to Miami, then flipping to Florida, then all the NIL stuff they're still dealing with now, falling through, going to Arizona State, then transferring to Georgia, now being in Georgia, doing the lawsuit against Billy Napier and Hugh Hathcock and the crew. He's kind of a perfect microcosm because that guy has been in the college football landscape for 2 years and he's been a part of multiple big attention grabbing stories. Never once has it had anything to do with him playing football, right?
Right.
So that's kind of what I was thinking about while you're talking. Not really a positive or negative thing necessarily. It's just there's so many right now we're in such a big transition period of college football, the biggest transition period the sport has ever seen, that there's just so many politics that are having to be sorted out right now.
Well, and we've seen talk about transition. I mean, the schedule came out for a couple of times for games this year. Oklahoma, Texas is moving to 3:30 as compared to what it usually is at noon. Ohio State, Michigan's been at noon a lot of the times the last couple of years. I think that's still going to be at noon. ABC is now going to be with the SEC. A lot of that stuff just doesn't bother me as it does for some. Like move the game from CBS to ABC or ESPN or whomever doesn't bother me like some. It just I don't know about you. Like on a college football Saturday, I know what time my teams play or the games I want to see. If the game's at 7, I just turn the game on at 7. Like I don't need to see the coverage 15, 30 minutes before because they're not going to say anything I don't know already. Like none of that stuff bothers me, but it bothers some.
Yeah, it bothers some because I think college football a lot like I think you could compare it to like Major League Baseball in this way in terms of you just have a lot of purists of the sport that don't like to see a lot of the change that's happening, like you said earlier. Um, and how there are so many things in college football throughout history that we have revisionist history now and we think it was the good old days and all this good stuff. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, I look back and think this was mostly before our time. But I look back and think about how many seasons had like co-national champions, and I mean that's dumb,
That was right before we were born. I wasn't that long
right?
ago.
Exactly. Like I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's stupid.
Yeah.
Like, and but people look back at that time and they're like, oh, the good old days when we had co-national champions, and we just took a vote between the winner of the Orange Bowl and the Sugar Bowl and decided that we're going to give them a split of the national championship. Like, no, I like the fact now there's an undisputed no, we're duking this out on the field.
Well, I mean, if you go back to the early 80s, BYU was a national champion, and they went to a bowl game. They played a 6-6 Michigan team. Imagine if that happened today. Imagine if Alabama went to the Orange Bowl and played a bad, Pitt team, and they were declared a national champion. Like we would, that doesn't make any
Pitt's like
sense.
7-5.
Yeah, Pitt 7-5. They had a good game against West Virginia to end their season. I just, you know, since we're Gator fans, we can look more to their side. Whenever the SEC started adding teams, remember Florida always played Auburn every year, and then
Back
Auburn went
before,
away,
pretty much before our time, yeah.
right? And then that went away. A lot of people were mad, and then you got LSU. Think about how many good moments from the Florida LSU game have become. And I would much rather, obviously, me and you were both 26, and we didn't live through the 80s and 90s. Like would Florida Auburn still have been a good thing? Yeah, it would have been good. But LSU is still like really, really good. And
LSU's been great.
I would have played LSU in the last 20, 30 years than Auburn.
I think if you look at if you take out the 90s, because the 90s were so classic between these two teams, but if you were to go from probably 2000 and forward to this day, the Florida LSU rivalry has been every bit as fun, if not more, than the Florida Tennessee rivalry. That's how good of a rivalry it's been. It's been great. So, yeah, to your point, I mean that's a perfect example of like the change. I know for a fact, and you know for a fact, as you just said, and we have people in our lives who are older Gator fans than ourselves that were very upset when the Auburn game went away. And just like you said, the LSU game has adapted. And look, as long as on Saturdays there's still high drama and great football being played that we all enjoy watching, the politics of it are going to sort itself out for the most part. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at with the crux of this whole topic is there's a lot of negativity around all the politics of the game that are happening right now. And people say this is wrong. We need a commissioner, like you said. We need all this. This is terrible. This is bad. We should do this instead of this. This is wrong. The portal and NIL and all that. But a college football Saturday, what are you going to be spending 12 hours doing that day?
Right. So much of like, we had a lot of the same storylines going into last year, with everything going on outside of the sport. And everybody wants to talk about the negativity and this isn't right, that's not right. And yet college football is still the most watched it's ever been. The 2 playoff games had over 20 million people watch, which is really good if you look at every other sport. And the national title game got a lot of people to watch. So people are still watching. It's just I don't know, the lead up to it. I want to get your thought on this. So Matt Hayes, some slappy from Saturday down south. I know him, by the way.
Some guy,
Um,
some bald guy.
yeah. Um, he put out a report that USC was trying to get out of the LSU game for 2 years now. You have all these, the big conferences now. The schedule's going to be a lot tougher. It used to be you played in a conference, even if you had a tough conference slate, you probably had 3, 4 tough games. The others were, mesh. You might have one game that's the middle of the pack that would be tough game for you. You come out flat, whatever. Well, you're going to see a lot of these games now be top notch. Something that the NFL has always done a good job of having quality games week in and week out. Something that college football has lacked behind, specifically in the non-conference. I don't know about you, Graham, but I want to have everybody's talking about Florida's murderous row schedule. I'm fine with Florida's schedule and what USC is doing as compared to granted it's different time. Michigan last year playing UNLV or them playing Coastal Carolina or them playing Mercer. Like those days have got to go for college football. You got to be able to play pound for pound the teams that are like you, the teams that recruit the same guys as you week in and week out.
So I totally agree, but the problem has always been, and this is somewhat changing now, and it's going to continue to change. The expanded playoff certainly helps this cause. The expanded, basically what's becoming super conferences helps this cause because you were saying out of conference. This is getting to the point where a lot of these games aren't even out of conference anymore. Because it's just there's these big, giant, really hyper competitive leagues that you can fill a tough schedule with. But I agree with you that the sport is better when the best teams are playing the best teams throughout the season. But the reason that that hasn't been happening, and kind of where I've always stood on this argument, is the sport has never competitively rewarded you for doing that. That's been the problem. This is why Nick Saban for forever would play these weak out of conference opponents because there was no reward in playing good teams. I go back to it was I believe it was 2019, the Oregon Ducks. I'm sure you remember this game. It was Bo Nix's first college football game. Oregon and Auburn played each other, right? Bo Nix was the starter at Auburn. They had like a last second miraculous win over Oregon, right? That was a neutral site game, maybe was it in Dallas, maybe?
Dallas or Atlanta, one of the two.
Um, Here's why I go back to that game. And this is kind of the crux of what we're talking about here. That is a really strong kickoff classic out of conference matchup, right? Oregon versus Auburn. We never get to see that. That's an SEC team. What was that? A Pac-12 team? Like two like historical great programs, good teams playing each other week one. We love that, right? We want more of that. When you fast forward to the end of that season, Oregon ended up being they had 2 losses and they missed the college football playoff because of that. If instead of if instead of Auburn, they had played some tiny school and beat them by 50, they would have been rewarded for that at the end of their season. So in essentially they got punished for playing a more competitive out of conference opponent. They got punished for doing what we're all clamoring and asking for schools to do. So fast forward to now, that team would have been in the college football playoff in an expanded 12-team playoff, right? So that helps for sure. And then again, you talk about the fact that a lot of these teams are just in the same conference in the first place, so they have to play each other. They can't get out of it now. I mean, you look at Florida's schedule, and it is really hard, and that does include out of conference opponents. Let's take Florida State away because we know they're going to play them regardless. What are the other tough out of conference games? Miami, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so those two are difficult games that in theory they could have just played cupcakes instead, right? But other than that, their schedule's murderer's row because of SEC games, right? They got to go to Texas this year, the newest member of the league, who is going to be a probably double-digit favorite in that game at Texas. So it's kind of taking care of itself because of the expanded conferences. Because again, these teams can't get out of playing each other now; they're in the same conference. Um, the out of conference thing, I agree with you in principle. I want better games. I want start to finish college football. I want there to be appointment television every single week. The weeks that suck are those, in the past it was typically because there's normally some good kickoff classics, but like week 2, week 3 before conference play gets going, there'll be a couple weeks where it's a bunch of duds throughout the day. And then typically that week before rivalry week, after conference play, and especially in the SEC because you only play 8 games before rivalry week the next week. Um, I agree with you that I want the great games, but until the sport is competitively rewarding you, why would a coach go out of his way to do that? If I'm a coach, I wouldn't schedule it. You can't blame Nick Saban for saying I got a hard SEC schedule already. If I win my games and take care of business, I'm walking into the college football playoff. I'm not putting my team at risk when every game matters in college football like it does to lose. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, one more example. I remember 2017 when Ohio State lost to Oklahoma.
Yes. Yep.
Ohio State went on to get blown out by Iowa, and everybody was like, they got blown out by Oklahoma. It's like, no, Ohio State had to lead late in the third quarter. They just got blown out in the fourth quarter, but everybody remembers the score being like 31-16, whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think, now that there's more teams to supply from that you can pick for this playoff, um, I think the committee will be more lenient, but we'll see.
And the biggest thing too, just last thing to put a bow on this, like now with the expanded playoff, and again, what makes this better, I've always been for the expanded playoff because of this very reason. Regardless of your out of conference schedule now, if you win one of the major conferences, you're making the playoff, right? So I, as a coach, am probably more willing to play a tougher out of conference schedule because at least I can go into the season and I know exactly what I have to do to be able to compete for a championship. Versus in the past, man, I can't risk that loss because I don't totally know what's going to get me in or not.
What do we got, about less than 10 minutes here?
Something like that.
All right. Last thing before we roll. The NCAA is going to be able to play players now. We don't know all of the exact details. Um, Basically, the gist of it is there's not going to be any walk-ons for the football team. Everybody's going to be on scholarship for the baseball team, softball team, yada yada yada. Um, what was your initial thought when you saw the NCAA is going to start paying the players?
Oh, my initial thought was back to the last thing you just said. The other sports, like the non-football basketball, big winners here. Like baseball is a huge winner, man. That's great for baseball to get that many scholarships for their team. And then I think it's a step in the right direction. I don't know that it fixes all the problems that are existing right now with NIL and the portal and kind of how everything's working in this weird sort of marketplace that's going on with players. It doesn't fix it, but it helps. I think it creates more of a baseline of what we will eventually get to of a kind of a regulated market and sort of understanding how things are going to work. And I think it helps progressively step us in the direction of it's going to be less about pay for play in terms of basically highly rated recruits and highly rated portal guys are just going to the highest bidder and they're just being auctioned off every season to it's going to go a little bit more back to players just going to a program that they feel is most right for them for football reasons. Or I'm saying football because I'm talking football, but any sport, but we're really talking about football here. And then where they're really going to make the NIL money we're talking about now is going to be more about keeping top players for a university, which that I'm fine with because you've earned it. And to me, it's a good thing if a player Like Graham Mertz, for example. Graham Mertz transfers to Florida last year. A lot of people were really down on him, including myself. I was not a high believer in Graham Mertz. I did not have a lot of stock in him. Plays really well last year, even though the team wasn't very good, he performed. The coaching staff really wanted him back because they needed that experience, and they knew DJ Lagway was coming in, but they didn't want to have to go trot out a true freshman week one. They wanted a guy who'd been in the system, has played a lot of college football, as DJ Lagway kind of gets ingrained in the program in college football itself. So Graham Mertz got a really nice, substantial NIL deal from Florida Victorious to stick around. That's a great system. And I think with the schools paying the players, because that's going to be a more baseline number, and everyone's kind of going to get more of a flat rate from the bottom up, then the top guys can go earn what they deserve based on their market and them performing because their school wants them to stick around. And again, that I got way less of an issue with because those guys have played college football and they've earned it. I've seen them do things on the field. So it doesn't fix the problems, but it's a step in the right direction was really my main thing.
I just can't wait to see an 18-year-old get whatever $40,000 and then burn it all, and then them have to find out that they got to pay taxes at the end of the year, and then they're gonna be like, "Oh, this is what really living is like." I mean, it's crazy to think that it's 2024 that for you know our generation, the last decade, I'll say, people on YouTube have been able to make 50 to $100,000, like that UCF kicker destroying, and it has been so frowned upon that you're not gonna sacrifice for the team or do this and do that. Any industry in America, you can make money and make as much money as you want when you turn 18, except for college football
I
or
know it's
the
crazy.
college athlete. But now it's all, everything's dandy. Graham, I'll let you go. I know you got Nashville stuff.
Got a wedding.
Whatever it is.
It's wedding season, bro.
Yeah, wedding tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. Wedding tomorrow, rehearsal dinner tonight, and we had a nice little fun get together thing. We had like a table and everything in downtown Nashville last night. It was crazy.
Nice, nice. I've never been to Nashville. I need to go there one day.
It's a wild place. I'm not the first victim that Broadway has claimed last night, and I won't be the last.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do this weekend. It's hot down here, per usual. I might golf or do something. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah.
I'm gonna do something. All right, that'll do it for this episode today. I'm Dylan Denmark. It's Graham Marsh on Denmark and Marsh. We'll see y'all next week.
Yes, sir.